One of the great challenges of corporate video today is that most of it is a lot more corporate than it is video. It has the simplicity and the efficiency of business, but little of the engagement that we associate with video and television. That's because the primary process for making corporate video is to take the various types of familiar corporate events, like live presentations, training courses, and in-person meetings, and then try to translate them into the video medium. What that usually means is that someone points a video camera at the event and presses the record button. When you make video this way, you might wind up with an accurate record of a corporate event, but what you won't get is something that's really video, something that's actually engaging to watch. What if we could make corporate video a little less corporate and a little more video? In other words, how could we try to make business video productions more engaging to watch, and by doing that, make them more effective at getting their message across? That's the idea behind the Kontiki video toolbox and this video clip. To present some standard templates of television production, formats that TV producers have been using to engage audiences for years, and by adapting them to business communications goals, show how they can work for corporate video, and how they should be a part of every Kontiki producer's video toolbox. This video clip will show you 5 example clips in formats that should be in every producer's toolbox. They are: 1. The interview, where the interview subject talks off the cuff to an unseen and unheard interviewer about the subject you're trying to convey. 2. The news story, which uses basic documentary techniques to both show and tell about a subject. 3. The live update, where a webcam and some simple guidelines can make for a very easy to produce but effective video message. 4. The conversation or role play, which shows the back and forth of 2 people talking and can be either a scripted and play-acted dialogue or a true unplanned conversation. And finally, 5. A few techniques for improving the video of a stand-up PowerPoint presentation. Each of these example clips has the same communications objective: to introduce a new marketing strategy to employees. Each clip goes about reaching that objective in a different way, according to its format. As you watch, you'll be able to see each template's strengths and weaknesses, and also get a sense for the complexity of the video shoot and edit. And there are 3 ways you can watch each clip: in its original form, with a producer's commentary that talks about the format and how to make it work, or with a director's commentary that talks about the best way to shoot and edit your footage. Let's get started. There are different kinds of interviews, but this one is the simplest and often the most effective. The interviewer sits right next to the camera, asking the questions, and the subject looks at and talks to the interviewer and not at the camera. This is a great alternative to that scourge of business video, the talking head, which is when the subject looks and talks directly at the camera, often with prepared talking points or a full script. Talking heads often wind up looking and sounding awkward, because unless your subject is a professional news anchor, they're not used to talking to a camera, and that winds up making them look stiff and uncomfortable. But everyone knows how to talk to a human face, and that's one thing that makes an interview much easier to produce well. Another thing that makes an interview feel more natural is that it's never scripted out. The subject should always be answering questions off the cuff, even if you discuss their general answers beforehand. The biggest challenge with an interview can be getting your subject to say what you want them to say, in a way that you can make work in the edit. For some, especially senior executives in bigger companies, one small question will get you a stream of articulate responses, and you're done. But for most people, there are 2 important things you'll need to remember. First, it's important to phrase your questions so your subject will respond in complete sentences. This is essential if their answers are going to stand on their own without viewers hearing your question. The other thing that can be a challenge in an interview is keeping your subject relaxed, comfortable, and conversational. When someone feels nervous or uncomfortable, it usually comes across on the screen, and it's a big distraction to the viewer who's likely to start thinking about how nervous the subject is instead of listening to what they're saying. One common reason for this is if your subject starts trying to memorize what it is they're going to say, which almost always winds up making the interview look rehearsed or fake. We all expect an interview to look and sound like one half of a real, natural conversation, and your job as a producer is to do whatever you can to keep your subject comfortable and conversational.
We're seeing more and more people struggling with this, and we're excited about building this out through next year, but pretty aggressive timeline in the next 6 weeks before the holidays start.
One of the big advantages to producing corporate videos in news story or documentary style is that it's a format that's familiar to everyone, viewers and producers alike, and familiarity of form makes the message more accessible. In its simplest form, a news story has just two elements: voiceover narration of a script and what producers call B-roll, which is footage or graphics of whatever the voiceover is talking about. In this case, with a marketing strategy as the subject, there wasn't much that we could point a camera at to shoot B-roll, so we've used some simple graphics from a PowerPoint deck. We've also included several interview bites, which adds a lot to the documentary format. Although it might be easier to just write what you want to say into the voiceover script, as viewers, we all prefer to hear things from the horse's mouth when we can. The sales process becomes more manageable, and that makes VP of Sales Mike Merritt's job much easier.
I'll tell you why I'm excited about this. Right now, welcome everyone to the weekly sales broadcast.
The live update is really just a special form of the talking head format, where the subject looks and talks directly to the camera. And whether you actually stream it live or you record it for distribution later, the production approach is the same. The big appeal of this format is that it's very simple to produce. The challenge is that it can easily turn out stiff, awkward, and boring if you don't follow some basic guidelines. First, make sure you keep it very short. If you don't think you can get your message across in 1 or 2 minutes, then this format isn't a good choice. Second, as with the interview, it needs to be as off-the-cuff and informal as possible. Most people will wind up looking and sounding uncomfortable if they try to memorize what they're going to say, although jotting down some bullet points to refer to while you're recording is usually fine. The third guideline, and sometimes the hardest one to follow, is to avoid using this format at all unless your message genuinely takes advantage of the video medium. And here, that means that at least part of the message should be human and personal. An easy test is to ask yourself whether you're really adding value to this message by doing it in video rather than by sending an email. If it's just news and facts, the answer might be no. And because this format doesn't offer any visual variety, that means you're at risk of losing your audience to distraction and boredom. Where talking head video can add value to a message is where the person on camera is conveying nonverbal cues in addition to the facts. Nonverbal cues are the subtle signals that we pick up when we see and hear someone talking, from things like tone of voice and facial expression. And research shows that they can have a big impact on how a message is received. Subjects that have an emotional component are good candidates, with messages that inspire, or excite, or impress. Some messages will be bad news, and a competent on-camera presenter can also convey understanding, compassion, and reassurance in a way that's difficult with email.
I will see you next week. Have a great one. Scott, thanks for meeting with me. So I understand you have some concerns and questions about Kontiki?
The conversation role play is actually two different types of video that can be produced the same way. One is the conversation, which is essentially the same as an interview, but where the viewer also sees and hears the questions from the interviewer. It's unscripted and really works best if you can shoot it with two cameras, so that you can capture both sides of the conversation without stopping. What we've produced here is the other type, a role play, where we have two people acting their parts. In this case, a salesperson making a call on a prospective customer. Since the back and forth between a prospect and a salesperson is filled with nonverbal cues, video can be an excellent way to show both good and bad examples of sales technique. Although it's possible to script an exact dialogue, it often works better if you work from bullet points and try not to worry about the exact words. Like the other formats, if it comes out feeling awkward or artificial, the message is easily lost. In this case, we've also used some simple graphics to reinforce key points in the dialogue and make them easier to remember.
How do I know that it will be secure?
Well, look, this is about connecting your CEO with your employees.
Okay, so all of you have seen this deck, and some of
There
you
are
have
several
actually
ways
been
to deal with
creating this
PowerPoint
deck.
in
So,
video. The
given
simplest
that, what I
is
wanna
just
do
not to
take a
deal with
moment
it,
to make sure
and
we're on
maybe
the
let
same
users
page and kinda
download
go
the
through each of
PowerPoint
them to
file
let you know
and
kinda
advance
what
the
key
slides
points are.
themselves.
Right
But
off
it's
the
not a
top,
very
CEO
elegant
Connect.
solution to the problem. The next step is to
Right
just
off the
get a
top,
copy of
CEO
the deck
Connect,
after
which
the
we know is a core
presentation,
market focus
convert the
around
slides to a
driving
format your
service
editing
that is
software can read,
all-encompassing to
like
address the
JPEG,
need for
and
video
then try to
on,
edit the
to
slides
all
into the
quarterly
video of the
audience.
presenter.
So reach and engage. We
This
all
works
know that,
better than not
especially on
including
the
them in the
reach, no
video
one
at
does
all,
that but us.
but it usually has two
Employees
significant
look for
problems.
leadership that inspires.
First,
Well, it's all
when the
about
video
personal
gets
connection,
encoded
and you
down
can't
to the
get that
relatively
trust and
small
connection
size you'll need
without
for
seeing the
streaming,
nonverbal
many
cues
of the
and
small
all the other things
details
that
and
come with the
smaller
power of
text
video.
can become
Leaders
difficult or
want to
impossible
connect.
to
Of course
read.
they do, because you can't get
And
your
second,
employees to
you, the
engage
editor,
unless
will
they
have to
believe you
decide
and they
when to
trust
show the
you,
presenter and when to
that's
show the
just a
slides.
fundamental
No matter how you
leadership,
choose,
proposition
some of
for
your
them, and
audience
we
will
can do
wish
that.
they had more time to
And
see the
challenge
slides,
today
while
is
others
that
would
most
rather
people
see
don't
more
think
of the
they can,
presenter.
and we know that we have a unique employees to engage unless they believe you and they trust you. And that's
With
just a
newer systems
fundamental
that enable
leadership,
bigger files and
proposition,
fatter
and
streams,
we can do
like
that.
Kontiki,
And
it's possible
challenge
to
today
include both the
is that most
presenter
people
and the
don't think they
PowerPoint
can,
together,
and we know
side
that
by
we have a
side,
unique
as
solution
we've
that
done
addresses
here.
all of their concerns.
The advantage
So
is
that, in
obvious,
terms of how we
since
do
the
it.
slides
And
are
then
big
there's
enough
three
to read
specific
even
use cases
small
that we
type,
know that help
and no
people
one has to
understand how it's
choose whether they
applied
want to see
specifically,
slide
and
or
the fact
presenter.
that we can address each of those
There may be
specific
some
needs
technical
for CEO
challenges in
communication
producing
through
this
the video.
format,
The all-hands
including the
CEO,
editing skills to
is
composite
certainly
the elements together
number
and
one.
the encoding and
Video
compression.
conferencing to every
But
desktop,
this
being
can
able
be
to
a
extend their
useful format
telepresence and
if your
desktop
streaming solution
conferencing
can support it.
investments out to every employee so they can extend their reach once again. And of course,
We're showing here a screen capture of a truly interactive PowerPoint and video presentation, which needs to be delivered in an interactive format that's distinct from simple video. These kinds of presentations need special software to author them and play them back, so they can present additional technical challenges. But if you have the systems to do it, this is the best way to do video with PowerPoint, since in addition to dual windows with readable text, and without the file size and streaming challenges of the side-by-side approach, this format adds a clickable table of contents that gives the user full control of the presentation.